I tell you, I get this look at the little thumbnail right before it says "You're live," that has just been taken, and boy, they are distressing. I mean, there I am trying to put on my best, book jacket, benign older gentleman expression, and instead it is, yeah, it's just an effect. I mean, I keep thinking it's, oh my God, it's Mike from, Better Call Saul or something. Well, anyways, I have not too much. I mean, I got real spoiled by reading that novel. I mean, I always knew what I would do for, Friday Live for all these sessions, right? I could just, okay, next chapter. It's easy. Now I got to think. Well, I'm not. So too bad. One nifty notion that was relevant, just where my brain went for a bit, concerns driving up north, as I mentioned last week. We're leaving tomorrow. And so, anyway, if you expected me to be talking from the cabin this time, too bad. Maybe I'll do a little special while I'm there. I don't know. I mean, it's not like, revelatory or something to be up in a cabin, but whatever. The point is, I'm at home right now. So tomorrow we'll be driving up, and I got thinking and saying, all right, well, we are in the summer side of the two equinoxes. And so that means that as we drive up north, and since we are a lot closer to the curvature of the Earth than I'm used to being for most of my life, there will be a distinctive shift in day and night length. So I got to thinking and wondering if I had my notion of the Earth and its tilt and the sun and the shadow, properly situated in my mind. And my first venture was, well, okay, that means that as we go north and, on a real curve, not just, up and down somewhere near the equator, then it should be longer during the day. And then I second guessed and, doubted myself and thought, come on, you don't think you can just make shit up just because you call yourself an intellectual. Come on. So I, went on my fingers and visualized it and everything. And sure enough, that's what it seemed like. But then I second guessed that. Well, anyway, no, it's true. I was right. Could have been wrong. I'm frequently wrong, but this time I wasn't. So yes, that's the important thing. Now that means two things of interest. One, if we were between, on the other side of the equinoxes, so after October, before next March, if I were to do the same trip, then it would be the nights that would be longer, not the days. So, okay, hopefully you just visualized the whole thing properly, and I'm wondering why I talked about something so obvious. It is kind of interesting, though, and it wasn't immediately obvious, like, no knowledge without even blinking. It wasn't, I had to actually do the visualization to figure it out, because I'm so used to thinking about going around and around when it comes to day length, when it comes to seasons, when it comes to climates and things like that. And as far as going north and south are concerned, I'm, I don't know, less skilled. I mean, we talk about, shifting latitude, certainly going up and down, but not much about really going long enough so that we actually think about the longitude as such. So anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting just to spot something about the world that I hadn't really put mind to before. Well, with that in mind, I went to thinking more about, things that happened along this portion, of the Earth all the way around. And I was, musing over geography and stuff like that. And also due to the vagaries of thinking about role-playing games and systems and settings and stuff like that, my mind happened upon the 100 Years' War, so-called, which concerned what today are England and France, and during the early mid 1300s to the early mid 1400s. and they're mostly famous because of the plays of Shakespeare. So that's where we're talking about all the Henrys, basically. And I'm always interested in these periods of European history because very unfashionably and very unwelcomely, I have the unpleasant view that if it were not for the contact with the New World, with the Americas, then that little spit of land would have remained a cow town indefinitely. And that there would never have been, as certainly would not have been as much of an end run around the Levantine hub of commerce for the continents on this side. Yeah, there was some end runs. I mean, Portuguese were, scooting around the Horn of Africa and stuff like that, but it wasn't as, obviously, running into the Americas and then the enormous boom in silver and all sorts of things. All of these European efforts with the not too long ago split off Roman Catholic Church and the events of the Crusades. It's kind of interesting, and before that point, the Crusades are the biggie for that portion of the world. And then after that, then boom, you have this completely different interaction, this global interaction, and the sort of central hub empire is outflanked much more so, than had ever been conceivable by anyone. So anyways, I'm always really interested in this because most of the literature and history we have comes from after that. And so looking back on it, all of a sudden it becomes tremendously important which little cattle baron killed which other little cattle baron in this, throwaway little crap island. And we give them numbers. Okay, so that led me to think, wait a minute, okay, for a long time, it's been obvious to me that no, when you're Henry the First, you don't call yourself Henry the First. And Henry II doesn't call himself Henry II. No, the numbers get plastered on a few numbers later when some grandnephew / cousin through the maternal line, murderer has, done the murdering and, grabbed the throne for the chair. It's not even a throne. There weren't thrones. Grabs the chair for a little bit and says, well, I'm a Henry. So how many? 1, 2, 3. Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to be the fifth Henry. Okay. So that means that guy's the fourth and that guy's the third and that guy's the second and so on. And so that's something that I actually never learned directly as history content was in any of these numbered lineages, and they're never just father to son to father to son to father to son. That never happens. You look at the lineage and you say, all right, when did they start numbering? In other words, when were the numbers introduced and therefore retconned backwards, so that all of a sudden you were continuous with that guy that everybody sort of lionizes now, given that he himself was some sort of grandnephew murderer of some through maternal line who ended up grabbing the chair for a little while in his time. Well, anyway, so I went and scanned through, instead of going back and doing Bill, I went and scanned through a couple of summaries and brushed up remembering, because I remember studying this stuff. And even then thinking, isn't this a little trivial? I mean, they're all first cousins anyway. Who cares? I mean, why? I'm more interested in why we have, Norman gentry now, hooking up with the Welsh power players, which is kind of interesting, given that what we have the Celts there, and then over centuries we've got Saxons and Angles, taking over the joint, filling up the joint, and so then we've got this little channel with Bretons basically on either side of it, well, Saxons mostly. Then we have the Britons here, and then they, of course, send up their little conqueror guy that he basically says he wants a big chair. He's not going to get a big chair here, so he's going to have a big chair there. So, but anyway, they're all fucking related. I mean, all these basically badasses, who are organizing people who can go kill each other's cousins, and so it's a mafia fight. I mean, it's just a mafia fight, and they're all in the same family. There's nothing about this, except that we're talking about a fairly small little part of land, and it's attached to a whole bunch of other pieces of land, and so you end up with issues in Spain. So Portugal, is splitting off like right now. If you look at what is now France along the Channel, and you see Normandy and Brittany, and recognize that back then, the Normandy, Brittany, and then running down the side on the west coast of France into Gascony. This Gascony, Guyenne, Aquitaine, the names kind of mingle up there. Anyway, that is all considered continuous. So this whole notion of, okay, north of the Channel, that's England, and then south of the Channel, that block, it looks so organized, it looks so straightforward. England, France, that's not how people were looking at it at all. So that does interest me. I mean, what it does interest me that the cattle baron, elbow your cousin in the eye, and make up a new law and see if you can get the other peers, to agree with your law, which is sort of reversal. See, it's legal. We're going to do the legal thing. It's kind of like it's legal now that you knifed that guy. Yeah. So anyway, it's really interesting to see, of course, modern day, concepts of identity being completely rooted in this crap, which again, without the later elevation of these regions into wealth through this completely other phenomenon, without it, you'd end up basically with all of this being of no interest whatsoever, except for a few geeky archaeologists who, would say, hey, did you realize there was this conflict for about 100 years and it kind of changed up the way the languages were distributed right around then? And everybody else is like, oh, man, can you just turn off the educational TV channel? I mean, come on, my show's on. So anyway, not a whole lot of content, to be fascinated by, charmed by from me, just kind of places where my mind goes. One of the reasons, though, is that I'm going to, nab the poor son who got nabbed by Genesis, recently, because it might be cool to pull down the map and to, point out that these are historically studied, and in previous generations and particular parts of the world, it was considered fundamental history to know each and every Henry and Charles and Louis and Richard and Philip, whoever, knifed a cousin in the back for 100 years. That, of course, would be tremendously important. I mean, like fundamental, foundational to education. I mean, if you don't know them, you aren't educated. And that was the point of view during the British Empire, and it bled into and became a big part of American historical education, so that I, for example, was inculcated, quite carefully into the 100 Years' War, the Wars of the Roses, the details of the upcoming, crises of Portugal, Spain, Belgium, then moving into the English-French wars of the 1700s. Well, I just skipped like all the religious ones. Sorry, then of course the 30 Years' War got planted there, everything going up to it and everything coming out of that. Anyway, but yeah, so for me, European history was this, battle by battle and consequence by consequence and ideology by ideology and personality by personality. And it was during a period when sort of the great man approach was sort of hitting its limits and was being connected to or embedded within a much more, they called it Aspire at the time, right? Art, science, politics, intellectual, and religious and economic. So the point was that you had to know all of that. It all had to, the shifts and everything for any given moment you had to have at your fingertips. So, yet, of course, the textbooks, traditions, and habits were all about which Henry was which. So it was kind of an interesting, blend of perspectives. Given all that, so when I read Shakespeare, I'm happy, right? I'm looking at it and saying, all right, so this is here written in the late 1500s, and it's talking about around 1400, and you're talking to Elizabeth, right? You're making plays. Elizabeth is watching these, and after she dies, then it's James who's watching these, and these people have opinions, and so you're writing these plays, and these people are freaking watching them. I mean, it's a little tense, right? I mean, it's kind of important what you put down for important what you put down about that Henry, or about that Richard, and so on. Well, anyway, I had a good time thinking about what I did with my son reading Genesis, and you can see what's coming. Yeah. Not too long from now, he's going to get Henried, and we're going to have a map, and we're going to have perspective, and we're going to have geography, and we're going to have stuff like that. And maybe I'll get him on here one of these days and, have him tell you what it's like to suddenly be collared by your dad. And it's time for the map, right? And the kid's like, oh, here it comes. Well, anyway, that's that. I will talk with you later on. I'll tell you how the trip went. And I will probably be coming up with a little more content for a bit, because these sort of fireside chat things must be kind of boring. Okay, bye.